For my parents' 30th anniversary, I planned a luxurious trip to Switzerland for them. But at the airport, my mom ordered me to go home, saying, "We are going on the trip with your younger sister, a college dropout. She is more intelligent than you." I smiled and left them. However, when they landed at the airport, a big surprise awaited them, one they never expected. I never thought I'd reach the day when I would finally say, enough. But looking back, maybe I should have seen it coming. For as long as I can remember, Emily always came first. It wasn't always obvious, at least not when we were kids. But as we grew older, it became impossible to ignore. If she needed something, my parents made sure she got it, even if it meant taking from me. If she made a mistake, they smoothed it over. No consequences, no lessons learned. And if I ever needed anything, well, they always seemed to have a reason why it had to wait. I should have known this trip would be no different. For 4 years, I worked extra hours, took on difficult projects, and cut back on every unnecessary expense so I could save for something truly special. My parents' 30th wedding anniversary was coming up, and I wanted to give them a memory they would cherish forever. A luxurious trip to Spain, first-class flights, stunning 5-star hotels, private guided tours, everything planned down to the smallest detail. I imagine my mother's excitement as we walked through the streets of Barcelona, my father's quiet appreciation as he sipped wine in a sunlit cafe in Madrid. I wanted this to be a gift that showed them how much they meant to me. But I made a mistake. I thought my effort would matter. The morning of the flight, I pulled up in front of my parents' house, feeling a mix of exhaustion and excitement. Everything was packed and ready. I had checked and double-checked every reservation, every itinerary. When my mother stepped out onto the porch with her suitcase, I smiled. It's finally happening. But before I could even get out of the car, I saw her, Emily, standing behind her, dragging her own suitcase along the pavement. I froze. A sinking feeling clawed at my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. My mother smiled as if this was just another casual conversation. "Oh, Sophia, we decided Emily should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately, and she really needs a break." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "Instead of me?" Emily smirked, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "Yeah, thanks for understanding, sophomore." "Understanding?" I worked for 4 years to pay for this trip. I sacrificed my weekends, put my personal life on hold, and skipped vacations just to afford it. And now, at the last minute, I was being replaced? "I paid for everything," I said, my voice quieter this time. I could barely get the words out. "I booked this trip. It's for all of us." My mother waved a dismissive hand. "And we're grateful, sweetheart. But you're always working so hard. You can take another trip later." "Another trip later?" I turned to my father, searching for some kind of support.
He wouldn't even look at me.
Instead, he picked up his suitcase and muttered, "Thanks for driving us." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them how cruel and unfair this was. But what would be the point? I had spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, and in the end, it didn't matter. I swallowed down the lump in my throat and forced a tight smile. "Let's get going then." They didn't notice how hard I gripped the steering wheel on the drive to the airport. They didn't notice how I clenched my jaw as Emily babbled about all the shopping she planned to do in Barcelona, as if the trip was hers. At one point, my father cleared his throat awkwardly. "Thank you for driving us, Sophia. I know this feels unusual." I let out a hollow laugh. "Unusual? That's an interesting way to put it." He said nothing after that. As I pulled up to the airport drop-off zone, I stepped out to help with their luggage. My mother wrapped me in a hug, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This means a lot to us." Emily beamed as she dragged her suitcase toward the terminal. "Thanks, Sophia. You're the best." I stood there, watching them walk away, disappearing into the airport without a second thought. As if I didn't exist. The drive home was a blur. Once I got there, I just sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The betrayal hit me in waves, first as anger, then as heartbreak, and then something else.
Clarity.
It didn't matter how much I sacrificed. It would never be enough for them. I took a deep breath, wiped my hands against my jeans, and walked into the house. Without hesitation, I opened my laptop and logged into every travel account I had used to book the trip. Flight reservations canceled. Hotel bookings refunded. Private tours gone. I stared at the confirmation emails piling up in my inbox, feeling lighter than I had in years. They wanted to take Emily instead?
Fine.
But they wouldn't be staying in luxury hotels or enjoying private tours on my dime. When their flight landed in Spain, the frantic calls started immediately. I ignored them. Then came the text. Mom, Sophia, what's going on? The hotel won't let us check in. Call me now. Dad, there's a problem with the reservations. Fix it, please. Emily, this is so petty. You're ruining everything. Just fix it, Sophia. For the first time in my life, I didn't fix it. I turned off my phone, leaned back in my chair, and let out a long, deep breath. For once, I wasn't their fixer. I was just me. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The silence was beautiful. For years, my life had been filled with the endless demands of my family, their voices, their expectations, their disappointments when I wasn't bending over backward fast enough.
But now?
Now, my phone sat face down on the table, buzzing relentlessly with calls I wasn't answering, messages I wasn't reading. I took my time unpacking the suitcase that I had so carefully packed for myself, placing each unworn item back where it belonged. The dresses I'd imagined wearing in Madrid, the shoes I'd bought specifically for long walks through Barcelona, all tucked away neatly like they'd never left. But something inside me had changed. I had spent my entire life making things easier for them, covering for Emily's mistakes, putting my own needs aside, smiling through disappointments because that's what was expected. I had accepted it for so long that even I had started believing it was normal. But this wasn't normal, and I wasn't going to let them guilt me into fixing it. By the time the third day rolled around, my curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on, expecting the flood of messages I had ignored. I wasn't disappointed. Mom, Sophia, this has gone too far. The hotel won't let us check in, and we can't find anywhere decent to stay. Fix this now. Dad, your mother is really upset. We need to talk. Emily, you're being so dramatic. Just call the hotel and sort it out. This is ridiculous. I let out a breathless laugh. Ridiculous? Emily had waltzed into a fully paid vacation and thought I'd still be there to make sure she enjoyed it?
No.
Not this time. I scrolled further. Their situation was getting worse. The messages were growing more desperate. Mom, we're stuck in a horrible motel. The food is disgusting and the area is unsafe. This is humiliating. Fix this. Dad. Sophia, please. You don't have to prove a point. Just help us out. Emily. OMG. This is so embarrassing. We had to take a cab across the city because the hotel wouldn't let us in. I can't believe you did this. I could. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sorry. I didn't answer any of them. I spent my day in complete peace, drinking coffee in my apartment, catching up on work, and watching movies without interruptions. No family obligations. No one expecting me to clean up their mess. The next morning, though, they started calling. At first, I ignored them. But after 6 calls in a row, I finally picked up just to get it over with. The moment I answered, Mom's voice exploded through the phone. Sophia, what the hell is wrong with you? She snapped. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? We're stranded in a city where we don't even speak the language, and all our reservations are gone. I sipped my coffee, unfazed. I know. You know, she screeched. Then why would you do this? I leaned back in my chair. Because you decided I wasn't important enough to be on the trip I spent 4 years planning and paying for. If I wasn't invited, neither was my money. There was silence. Then, her voice turned sharp. We thought you'd understand. Understand what? I asked, my patience wearing thin. That no matter what I do, Emily will always come first? That my hard work and sacrifices mean nothing to you? Her breath came out in a huff.
This isn't about that.
Your sister needed this more than you. And I needed respect. I shot back. More silence. Then, from the background, I heard Emily's whiny voice. Mom, just hang up on her. She's being impossible. That was all I needed to hear. I let out a bitter laugh. You know what? Enjoy your trip. Oh, wait, you can't, because it was never yours to take. And then I hung up. The relief I felt afterward was indescribable. For years, I had let them walk all over me. I had swallowed my feelings, let them take from me, without a second thought. But this time, I had taken something back. The calls didn't stop. Over the next few days, my father tried his turn at reasoning with me. His messages were less angry, more guilt-ridden. Dad. Sophia, we need to talk. This is too much. Please don't do this to your mother. Sophia, we need to talk. No, Dad. We really don't. I didn't reply. I went about my life as if their vacation, or disaster, I should say, wasn't even happening. I cleaned my apartment, caught up with friends, even took an afternoon walk around the city. It was funny how, for the first time in years, I felt free. And then, the final voicemail came in. It was Mom again, but this time, she wasn't yelling. Her voice was quieter.
Exhausted.
Sophia, she sighed. We're back at the airport. The trip was a disaster, and I hope you're happy with yourself. Your sister is devastated, and your father and I are, well, disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. I listened to the message twice. Then, without hesitation, I deleted it. I wasn't happy with myself. I was proud. Proud that, for the first time in my life, I chose myself. Proud that I didn't let them manipulate me back into being their doormat. Proud that I let them deal with the consequences of their choices for once. I didn't call them back. I didn't text. I simply turned off my phone and sat back in my chair, feeling the weight that had been sitting on my chest for years finally lift. For the first time, I wasn't fixing their problems. And I didn't regret it one bit. The silence didn't last. It never did. For a few days after they returned, I had peace, real, uninterrupted peace. No phone calls demanding I fix things, no messages dripping with guilt and disappointment. I had braced myself for the storm, but for a brief moment, it seemed like they had finally accepted the truth. I wasn't their fixer anymore. Then, on the 5th day, the calls started again. At first, I ignored them. I told myself I didn't owe them anything, that whatever they had to say didn't matter. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. This time it was my father. His voice was quieter than before, calmer, but no less weighed down. Sophia, he started, as if searching for the right words. Your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me. I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out the window. Go on. He sighed. Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mother's upset, Emily's furious, and, well, it's just a mess. But you're better than this. I let out a humorless laugh. Better than what, Dad? Better than standing up for myself? Better than finally refusing to be the one who always sacrifices? That's not what I meant, he said quickly, his voice carrying that same familiar guilt he always had when he knew I was right. It's just you've always been the reasonable one. The one who keeps everything together. I felt my jaw clench.
Yeah, Dad.
I was. And what did that get me? You and Mom taking everything I worked for and handing it to Emily like it was nothing. There was a long pause. We didn't mean to hurt you, he said at last. I exhaled slowly, feeling that old familiar ache in my chest. Dad, whether you meant to or not, you did. More silence. Finally, he sighed again. You're punishing the whole family over one decision. Is that really fair? Something in me snapped. I tightened my grip on the phone. Fair. I repeated, my voice rising. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you and Mom decided I wasn't important enough to be part of my own trip? Was it fair when you replaced me like I didn't matter? We thought Emily needed it more, he said, though this time, his tone sounded weaker. Of course you did, I snapped. You always think she needs more. More attention. More support. More of everything. and I'm always the one expected to step aside for her. Well, not anymore. There was nothing left to say. I hung up. For a while, I just stood there, gripping the phone, my heart pounding. I had spent so many years waiting for that conversation, waiting for them to realize what they were doing to me, waiting for them to see me. And yet, even now, after everything, they still didn't. They weren't sorry. They were just inconvenienced. That was the moment I knew I wasn't waiting anymore. That weekend, I sat down with my laptop and booked a solo trip. Not to Spain. That place was tainted now, tied to a betrayal I wasn't ready to revisit. Instead, I chose Greece. A place that was completely mine, unburdened by memories of what should have been. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Emily. The only person who knew was Hannah, my best friend. When I told her, she let out an excited gasp. "You're actually doing it?" I nodded. "I am." She grinned. "About time." And for the first time in a very long time, I felt excited about something. For me. The day I left, I expected another call, another guilt trip, another last-minute attempt to pull me back. But surprisingly, my phone stayed silent. Maybe they had finally given up. Maybe they had just moved on the way they always expected me to. Either way, I didn't care. The moment I stepped off the plane in Athens, I felt it, a freedom I had never known before. No obligations. No family waiting for me to fix things. No one expecting me to give up my joy so someone else could have theirs. For the first time, I was the only person who mattered. I spent my days wandering cobblestone streets, sipping Greek coffee at seaside cafes, and getting lost in the ruins of ancient history. I stayed in luxurious hotels, ate the best food, and let myself experience everything without feeling guilty about it. And the best part? I didn't have to explain it to anyone. On my last night, I sat on a quiet beach, watching the sun set over the Aegean Sea, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Not because my family had changed, not because they had finally realized how much they had hurt me, but because for the first time I didn't need them to. I had spent so long believing that their approval, their validation, was the thing I needed most. But sitting there, with the warm sand beneath me and the waves crashing softly in the distance, I realized the truth. The only person's approval I had ever needed? My own. When I got back home from Greece, everything felt different. My apartment, my routine, even the air in Chicago. It all seemed lighter, as if I had shed something heavy that I'd been carrying for years. Maybe I had. For the first time in my life, I felt completely in control of my own happiness. No longer waiting for my parents' approval. No longer putting Emily's needs ahead of mine. No longer the fixer, the responsible one, the afterthought. And I wasn't going back. I had barely unpacked my suitcase when my phone rang. The moment I saw my mom's name flash on the screen, I hesitated. After weeks of silence, I figured they had finally moved on. But curiosity got the better of me. And this time, I picked up. "Sophia," she said, her voice unusually soft. "How was your trip?" I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe another guilt trip, another accusation. But this was new. It was amazing, I said simply. A pause. Then a careful sigh. "That's good to hear." I waited. I knew there was more coming. "We've been thinking a lot about what happened," she finally said. "Maybe we handled things poorly." I blinked. "Poorly?" I repeated, my voice calm but firm. "You replaced me on a trip I planned and paid for without even asking." Poorly is an understatement. She was silent for a moment. "Your father and we didn't realize how much it would hurt you." I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. "That's the problem, Mom. You never realize. And even when you do, it's only because it's inconvenient for you." She exhaled sharply, clearly not expecting me to say that. "That's not true. We love you, Sophia. We don't want to lose you." For a moment, I let myself feel the weight of those words. I had spent my whole life craving them, waiting for some sign that I actually mattered as much as Emily did. And now that they were finally saying it, it didn't mean what it used to. "You don't want to lose me?" I repeated. Then why did you act like I was replaceable? Her voice wavered. We thought Emily needed it more. I sighed. You always think Emily needs more. And I've always been expected to give up something for her. This time I didn't. And now you're upset that I finally put myself first. There was another pause. Emily's upset too, she admitted. She realizes she could have handled things better. I raised an eyebrow. That was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get from Emily. I wasn't sure if it was real or just another way to get me back in line. And honestly, I didn't care. I'm glad she feels that way, I said simply. Mom hesitated, then asked, "Can we fix this?" That was the real question, wasn't it? For years, I had thought fixing things was my job. That it was up to me to keep the family together, to push down my own feelings and make things okay even when I was the one hurting.
But now?
Now, I wasn't so sure I wanted to fix anything. I let out a slow breath. Mom, it's going to take more than words to fix this. I need to see real effort, not just apologies. Her voice was quieter this time. I understand. Did she? I didn't know. But for once, that wasn't my responsibility. We ended the call, and I felt something settle inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for them to change. Whether they did or not wasn't my burden to carry. Over the next few months, I kept my distance. I responded to their messages when I wanted to, but I didn't go out of my way to fix things. I didn't check in, didn't ask about Emily, didn't play the role of the responsible, reliable daughter anymore. Instead, I focused on me. I took a photography class, something I had always wanted to do, but never made time for. I redecorated my apartment, replacing the furniture my parents had given me years ago with pieces that felt uniquely mine. I joined a local hiking group, made new friends, and started planning my next solo trip. And the most surprising thing? I wasn't lonely. For years, I thought that putting myself first would mean losing my family. That if I ever stopped sacrificing for them, they would walk away completely. But the truth was, I had never really had them in the way I wanted. I had been a convenience, not a priority.
And now?
Now I was finally my own priority. One afternoon, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset when my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Emily. Emily, hey, I know things have been weird, but maybe we can talk soon. I stared at the message for a long time. Maybe a year ago, I would have jumped at the chance. I would have taken it as a sign that she was finally changing, finally seeing me as more than someone to take from.
But now?
Now, I wasn't waiting for her to change. I set my phone down, took a sip of my tea, and smiled to myself. Maybe I would respond. Maybe I wouldn't. But for the first time, that decision was completely mine. And that was freedom.